Hey y'all, and welcome to the next lecture in the Practical Packet Analysis course. This lecture is going to serve as your first introduction to Wireshark, and it's where we'll really start getting our hands dirty by actually installing Wireshark and beginning to use it. First, we'll cover what is Wireshark. I'll describe what it is, what its purpose is, and why it's so popular. Chances are, if you're in this course, you've probably already heard of it or know a little bit about it, but I'll talk a little bit about the history of Wireshark and why I choose to use it and why a lot of other analysts and network administrators choose to use it as well. From there, I'll go through a demo of actually installing Wireshark. I'll install it both on Windows and on an Ubuntu desktop system. So you can see the installation of Wireshark on both of those different platforms. Once we're installed, I'll give an overview of the Wireshark layout. So Wireshark is divided into 3 areas, and I'll describe what those areas are, how they interact and how they relate, and when you're going to want to use each specific area of the main Wireshark screen. A little later, we'll talk how you can customize that view, but we will dig into the default layout, why it was chosen, and why it works for most people. After that, we'll open some PCAP files. I'll show you how to open files. That's going to be a very important part of this course. I'm going to provide you with a lot of sample packet capture files you can open for your own analysis. And of course, you want to be able to pull those into Wireshark and open them. And if you're not familiar with Wireshark, you want to see how I'm doing that. From there and last, really, we'll pivot into your first packet capture. So it's a rite of passage for every person who's starting in packet analysis to do their first packet capture. And you may have thought we might not be doing it quite this early on, but I really do want it to be one of the first things you do is capture some packets. And really, once you've got Wireshark installed, it's quite easy. It can actually be only a single click away. So what we'll do is we'll open Wireshark, and I'll show you how to start capturing packets. I'll do that live on screen, and you can see me do it and then repeat it and do it yourself. So we're really talking about the basics here. The objectives of this module is to talk a little bit about what Wireshark is, how to install it, the very basics of how to open it and know what you're looking at, and how to open files and capture packets. And this is really going to be the fundamental foundation for moving on in the course as we start digging deeper and deeper into packets and into protocols and all the things that allow us to analyze network communication. So what is Wireshark? You may have heard of Wireshark before. You may actually know it by its previous name. So like we have the artist formerly known as Prince, we have the artist formerly known as Ethereal or Ethereal, depending on how you pronounce it. You see, Wireshark in its first iteration was called Ethereal, but due to some naming rights when its creator, Gerald Combs, moved from one employer to another, he was unable to keep that name, and that's where we got Wireshark. Now, of course, I think Wireshark's a much better name anyway, and certainly a cooler logo, so not much lost there. So we're talking about Wireshark, although you still, when looking up information and resources about packet analysis or about Wireshark, may still run into the Ethereal name, and all that you really need to know is that Ethereal turned into Wireshark. It evolved into that, and Ethereal is no longer, as far as I know, actively maintained, so Wireshark is what you want to focus on. Now, Wireshark itself is really, I describe it as the world's most popular packet analysis tool, and I don't think many people would argue about that. It was really one of the first graphical user interfaces to allow people to see what was on their network and actually analyze packet data in a way that made sense. Certainly there were tools like TCP dump, which allowed people to capture and analyze packets on the command line, but those tools don't provide nearly as much in terms of features or protocol support, and they're a lot more intimidating to people who maybe aren't as comfortable with the command line, or maybe they're running something like Windows and don't have a way to easily run TCP dump. There are certainly Windows alternatives, but still, if you're not comfortable with the command line, you're not comfortable with it, and who am I to force someone into that level of comfortability? Certainly we'll talk about that a little later when I go through those tools, but for now, Wireshark is a GUI, and that really works for a lot of people, and that's great. I'm comfortable with the command line, but I also use Wireshark because it's oftentimes the best tool for the job, and really that's what you want to use, is whatever the best tool for the job is. Now, Wireshark is also popular because it's open source, and that's to say that the source code for it is free and openly available online. Open source software has a lot of benefits. I'm not going to go into all of them here, but from a usability standpoint and a security standpoint, having the ability to go look at the code that's running behind the application you're using is very, very helpful. I can't tell you how many times where I've had a question about how a protocol dissector works, so how it's actually interpreting the rules of the protocol and how it's actually dissecting those onto the screen. And I've actually been able to go into the open source code and look at it and actually see how it's breaking up those fields. And in some cases, maybe it's breaking them up wrong, or maybe not necessarily wrong, but in a way that wouldn't be the most intuitive. And I can go in and look at that and even potentially make changes should I desire, so that I can parse those protocols as needed. With open source software, you also have the ability to extend the software. So if I wanted to create my own protocol dissector, I could do that too. And that's one of the reasons why Wireshark has over 1,000 protocol dissectors, is because anybody can write one and contribute one just with a little bit of programming knowledge and using the existing protocol dissectors as a base for learning and experimentation. So there are a lot of great benefits from that, not to mention the security benefit of having open code that's easily auditable by a lot of people outside of a single entity or single organization. So a lot of different benefits there. Now, I mentioned that Wireshark is graphical. It's a very robust GUI, and it's become much more robust over time. This includes adding a lot of cool graphing and statistical features, and also getting closer to unifying the user interface across multiple platforms, so across Linux and Mac and Windows, and getting something closer that works kind of across all those. It's not perfectly close. There are features that exist in one offering that doesn't exist in another, and Wireshark is really designed to work best on Windows, but it does work pretty well on all the other platforms too. I use it on whatever platform I happen to be using at the time. In this course, we're going to focus on Windows because that applies to most people and is where Wireshark is the most full-featured. But I've certainly used it on Linux and Mac as well. So there's support for a lot of different operating systems. Generally, most operating systems you're going to be using on the desktop, or in a lot of cases, most servers are going to support Wireshark in one form or another. Now, I mentioned that Wireshark supports 1,000 protocols, and when you're on a network that maybe has some unique or weird protocols, so maybe an industrial control system, SCADA type network is where you would see that, or maybe a high-tech company where you develop some of your own protocols that maybe are used out in the world but not as widely popular as something like HTTP, then the ability to support these unique protocols is going to be something very desirable to you. The fact that Wireshark supports over 1,000 of them is great. I'm unaware of any other tool that supports nearly that many different protocols. So by supporting them, that means it's able to read in that data and parse it based upon fields and show that to you in a unique way, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then, of course, from there, you can filter on it and do all the cool things that Wireshark lets you do. So that may not mean a lot to you now if you've not used Wireshark at all. But as I go through the different features, I think you'll see how the ability to read and parse these protocols interactively is a really useful way to deal with this data and understand exactly what's going on. So that's Wireshark. We're going to focus on it a lot in this course. And without further ado, maybe it's time to get off PowerPoint here and actually start showing you how to use Wireshark. So we'll go into how to install it, how to use it to open packet capture files, and how to perform your first packet capture with Wireshark. All right, so I'm logged in here to a Windows 10 virtual machine here that I have running inside of VMware Fusion on a Mac. So we're going to show how to install Wireshark first in Windows 10. So that's the most common operating system you'll be dealing with as of this recording. Now, in this case, you'll see I pulled up the Wireshark website at www.wireshark.org. Now, the website is pretty easy to navigate, and we see right here on the front page is a big download button that's really hard to miss. So that's what we want to do. In order to install Wireshark, we first have to download it. So I'm going to click on this button, and it's going to give me a few different options. It's going to first give me the option for the current stable release, both in 64-bit and 32-bit, as well as things like the source code. And I can also, if I want, look back at a stable release or an old stable release. So in this case, 2.0.9, which is an older version. Maybe there's a bug in a newer version or something. I don't want this necessarily in the newer version, then I can certainly install the older one. But generally, you're only going to do that if you have a very specific use case for it. In this case, I want the most up-to-date current version, 2.2.3 as of this recording, so I'm going to download that. So I'm going to click to download that here, and it'll take just a second to download. So we're all done here, and I'm going to execute this file that I just downloaded and install Wireshark and go through this wizard. Now, because Windows does have user account control and I'm installing software, I'm going to have to click yes through this prompt to allow it to make the changes that I'm making here. I have permissions to do this on this system. I have an administrative account, so I can go ahead and click through that prompt, but you do have to accept the user account control notification. Nonetheless, assuming you're using a default install and it's not suppressed in any other way. I'm going to go ahead and click next through the first prompt, and I'm going to read and accept the license agreement. We'll assume I've already read this here, so I'll just go ahead and click agree. Now, the first decision you have to make is what components of Wireshark you want to install. You'll see by default, pretty much everything is selected here. So we have Wireshark, which is the graphical user interface for packet analysis that we're going to use throughout this course. We have T-Shark, which is the command line version of Wireshark, terminal-based Wireshark, if you will, and we're going to use that a little bit in this course as well. You also have a couple other options like the Wireshark 1 Classic User Interface, various plugins and extensions, tools, and the user's guide. For the most part, unless you have a really specific reason not to, I'm going to recommend you leave the default settings here and choose to install everything, as we'll be using a lot of these different things throughout the course. After clicking next, we have a couple options about things like shortcuts. So I can tell it if I want Wireshark to create a start menu item, a desktop icon, a quick launch icon, and so on. In this case, I really like the desktop icon, so I'm going to go ahead and click that and say I want that, as well as the quick launch icon and the start menu item. There's some legacy options here, which I'm not going to worry about too much. And then there's the option about file extensions and associating trace file extensions to Wireshark. In this case, I'm just going to leave this default and accept all of the options it recommends here. Next, I'm going to select the directory I want to install Wireshark in. I'm going to accept the default, and if you're going to be following along in this course, I would recommend you do the same, which is C Program Files Wireshark. Next, I'm going to be prompted to install WinPCAP. And we talked a little bit about packet capture drivers earlier and how they're needed to switch network cards into promiscuous mode, so the card will actually accept the packets that are not actually destined for it and not discard them, so you can analyze them and pass them on to your packet analysis utility. For Windows, by default, it's going to be WinPCAP, and it gives you the option to install this directly by checking this box. So I'm going to leave this checked. You see here that WinPCAP is currently not installed, as it says here, so I'm going to check that and hit next. Here I'll get the option to install USB PCAP, which will allow you to collect packets from USB ports. We're not going to use that in this course. It's not really necessary, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that unchecked, and then I'm going to click install. So what you see happening here is Wireshark is being installed, and depending upon how fast your system is and what level of resources you have available and how much resource contesting is going on, that'll depend on those things to see how long it takes to install Wireshark. In most cases, on any system with reasonable resources, it's only going to take a few seconds. Now you will notice that while installing it, the WinPCAP installer will pop up kind of midway through. So you start installing Wireshark, and then you have to kind of take a pause to install WinPCAP. And for the most part, installing it is fairly easy. I'm going to click next through these things, agree to the license agreement. I want WinPCAP started when the operating system starts, so it boots. I'm going to leave that checked. Makes things quite a bit easier. I'm going to click the install button, and you'll see that's going to progress quite quickly. It's already done. So I'm going to click finish, and Wireshark installation is going to continue and proceed. So we just took a quick break there so that WinPCAP could be installed midstream. That's going to be an important part of using Wireshark. You can certainly open packet capture files and read those without having WinPCAP installed and running. But if you want to capture your own packets and do that from your own network interfaces, you are going to need a packet capture driver, and WinPCAP is the default choice right now when installing Wireshark. So that's important to have. With that said, it looks like our installation is just completed. I'm going to click next. And we have an option. We can either show the current news, or we can choose to run Wireshark straight up from this installer. So I'm going to click that option. Click finish, and Wireshark is going to launch. Now, it might be a little slow the first time you launch it, but it shouldn't take that long since it's not actually loading any packets. So in this case, we're all up and running. We're ready to start either opening packet capture files or collecting our own packets. And you can see here, we see these nice little spark lines next to my network adapters, indicating that there is traffic being seen on the wire. So we can click one of those to start capturing traffic, or just open a file and review from there. But nonetheless, Wireshark install, quite easy, just a matter of downloading it, making a few selections. You can accept the defaults for the most part. That's what we did, minus a few little things. And then we're up and running and ready to start analyzing packets.